let's start us off. Discussing the issue.
The issue at hand is whether or not busing or other types of educational opportunities are the best way in order to improve education for all children. So our task is to decide among our resources which one will best defend, challenge, and or qualify the problem. Want to pass this off now?
Yeah.
Someone over there? There you go.
I've learned not to look anybody in the eye today.
I need to look less friendly. Okay. Yes, so I actually found it really interesting. I kind of went into this thinking it was going to be like everyone's going to be anti-busing. It was going to be no way, this is ridiculous, this is crazy. And when I saw the two pro-busing articles back to back, that kind of threw me for a loop, I think just because they were back to back. So you have the young man, Eric Montgomery, if you guys turn to the third article, talking about his experience in Charlotte's public schools as he says the golden time of the 70s and 80s. And I found that to be really interesting, coupled alongside Paige Leggett, the next one, when she was saying, this was how we got to experience other people, this is how we got to experience different kinds of people, and if I hadn't had these experiences, I wasn't going to be nearly as prepared for the world. So I actually have seen very few pro-busing articles in my experience, so that was a very interesting perspective for me to see. So,
I'll go.
thank you.
Okay, so I noticed that Mr. Izumi's comments, he's like, you know, what kids need is not busing, but rather greater access to charter schools. But I think what he's missing there is that charter schools are just another form of segregation. The thing that, and someone that teaches at a charter school, maybe you can tell me I'm wrong, but every public school I've taught in, if a student didn't want to be there, they still had to be there. And if they wanted to disrupt my class, there was nothing I could do about it, because they still had to be there. And whereas the success that I've always heard of from the private schools in our community and the charter schools my friends have taught at, that's not an issue they have. Every student had to do something to be able to get there. So what we end up with is a different form of segregation, but it's still segregation, right? There's still a second tier of education. So although I think a lot of the articles in here point out the importance of some kind of socioeconomic integration beyond just busing, I don't think the answer is just more charter schools. I do think there's probably a minimum standard that we aren't achieving. And I've seen it in schools I've taught where down the road they've got computer labs and all kinds of different things, and we're literally 2 miles away and there's nothing. And the difference is the socioeconomic status. I don't know if I made a point there or not.
I think when you made a comment about the charter schools, I hear your point.
And I'm willing to be wrong on that. I would love to hear that I'm wrong.
and I think my experiences at all the charter schools that I've taught, that hasn't been the case. And when I look in here and I see, and which one was it? It talks about, is it this one, integrating rich important matter?
The first one?
But anyway, they made a comment about, about going to charter schools and how, like, basically, I think that what happens with the charter schools is, like they said in the article, that it does become, those are parents that choose. But however, a lot of times those charter schools tend to be in the same areas.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, it is the same demographic of students. The only difference that you have there is a lot of times you have parents that are more involved.
Right.
And so therefore, when you think about that homeschool connection, there's a stronger homeschool connection. So
Right.
even if they're lacking the resources, they have the desire to be more involved in their child's education.
Which is exactly my point. What's making the charter schools successful is not that they're named charter, you know, it's not that there's a magic wand there. It's that because it's a charter school, because you have to choose or opt in, most of the stakeholders are involved.
Mm-hmm.
And when you deal with struggling public schools, and there are struggling public schools that are not in low-income areas, but they don't struggle as much, right? Their struggling is still at the norm. But when you deal with a very low-income school, and there is no opt-in, there is no buy-in, that's where I think a lot of the failure comes into place, and I think that's where the biggest issues are. So, in a way, yeah, but what happens to those kids that don't get into the charter school? They're still left behind.
The beauty behind the charter school is that you're absolutely positively right. People have the opportunity to opt in, which is also the same beauty of parochial schools and public schools. People have the option to opt in, where the money, manpower, materials can go to that particular school. Well, the article states that basically charter schools, you know, they found that on average students who attended, and this is the Izumi source, that students who attended charter schools for grades kindergarten through 8th grade could close the achievement gap among white and black students by about 86% in math and 66% in English. The irony is that there are charter schools that exist that close. So there are charter schools where the concept is we're going to pull our best and the brightest out, and they are there at schools that continue to be unsuccessful because the quality teaching, the quality instruction still is insufficient. The article from Bivens, in her last paragraph, she says school integration can't solve the larger problem of racial and socio inequity or deliver equity in an increasingly inequitable nation. And if it is held to such a standard, it will always fall short. And her concept of saying simply because we open more schools and we have more diversity is not the begin all end all. What we still have to understand is that these children come from somewhere. So they continue to come from poor communities, and they continue to come from middle class communities. They continue to come from areas that are not necessarily equipped with a certain millage rate. Where the zip code sometimes, oftentimes decides their graduation rate. So our charter schools, are there some great charter schools? Absolutely, I happen to be in one. But let's not forget Ivy Prep, which started out as a charter school in Georgia and had some difficulties.
Sorry, I'm the panicky shy kid, so I'm sorry. But to shift gears just a little bit, going back to the Montgomery source, where he said that he felt busing worked for him in the 70s and 80s. Within 20 or 30 years, by the time he came back in 2001, he found that his community was dominated by private schools. And so it was a resegregation, which I have, I teach at this school. At the end of that road is a country club. And at our school, we have 58% free and reduced lunch. And within 10 miles, there are 4 big private schools that are predominantly white schools with affluent parents. And the population at this school does not reflect that. And so I don't know that busing would help, because within 20 years it just went to kind of what we have now. But yeah, I don't know what point I was trying to make, but I thought
No, that busing wouldn't solve the problem.
it wouldn't solve the problem, right?
I can go, or you go.
Oh, so I was going to speak to this once again, the Montgomery article, as well as the Page-Leggett article when they talked about busing. It's really, as I was reading it, it really confirmed my fiance. He was a part of busing. And he often talks about his experiences. He had very, very fond memories of growing up, being able to go to a school system that he felt like was better than what he would have experienced had he gone to his neighborhood school. My daughter also, when we lived in the DC area, she went to a school, although it wasn't a charter school, it was a DC public school. However, in order for her to be able to attend that school, she had to test in that school, we had to enter that school, it had a whole process for her to be able to attend that school. So therefore, it was, I wouldn't say it was, I say it's diverse, but probably more so in the direction of students whose parents were more involved, who, like you said, once again, would want them to have a good education, but probably could afford a private school education. But since we had this option of sending our child to a great public school, that's where we're gonna go. So I guess for her, I feel like, and for him, that experience allowed her to have access to things that she wouldn't have had in the zone school. It allowed her to interact with students she probably wouldn't have interacted with as much at her own school. And I feel like because of that, it definitely did prepare her. Like my daughter now attends Emory University. Like, I mean, great school. I don't even have to pay for her to go. So, and I do believe that having that experience it basically helped to develop her into that type of a student. So when I think of this, I think of like, had I not had that choice, had she not had that choice, to go to be even outside of, because a lot of the students who went to her school, I saw different students. And it wasn't that they didn't have a lot of the resources, because like I said, I've taught at charter schools where they have lots of resources, but somehow the way they utilize those resources, it was different. And I saw that, like I said, when I look at my child and my own students.
Yeah, so I'm gonna kind of tie the charter and the busing kind of together. So I've worked in a public rural school in Arkansas, and then I've also worked in a charter school in obviously Atlanta, which is more urban. In the Arkansas school, if you look at the composites throughout the year, you literally watch integration happen, and then you watch white flight. Like they line the hallway. It's the craziest thing. But you talk to the principal, who's been there for 20 some odd years, and she tells you about the changing parental involvement. She tells you about the changing amount of money coming into the school. And you watch that happen. And now, I mean, I would go to the bank in that 1,800 person town, and they would say, oh, you teach those kids. Oh, you teach over there. And it was very much that way. And the idea of busing was something that the principal actually could remember. Like, she was like, yes, in high school, that's what happened here, in this town, and this, you should have seen our test scores. You should have seen the test scores, not just of the white students who were here, but the black students who were here. It was really interesting to watch that. And then I come to Atlanta, and I come to this charter school, and I almost see charter schools as kind of a Band-Aid to this white flight problem. And I don't know that there is, like, I work at a charter school, obviously, and I just don't know that there is a better way to do it right now, given our system, without dismantling our system and trying again, basically. And I see charter schools as kind of trying to solve that problem, and being successful in a lot of ways, and I work to be part of that, but at the same time, I don't see it as the end-all be-all solution.
Wait, was it?
Go ahead.
I wasn't gonna leave you.
I saw you nodding, and I was ready.
I was gonna leave you out.
I have to do that because I'm a softie and I want them to get an A. Remember, one of the things, everybody has to speak.
Yeah, I was looking over there and I saw the nod and I was about to just toss it.
Because I was going to ask for it.
Okay.
What really drew me was the article that said the zip code shouldn't affect the school quality. And I think a lot of that, because that is Stacey Abrams, her political, it was part of her political rhetoric, to speak, because I work, my school is located in a working class neighborhood. And I can tell you that the teachers that I work very, very hard to provide their students with the best education possible. And when I mention where I work, I get these looks. And I just feel that your zip code really should not affect what kind of your school quality. I just believe that once we, gosh, I've lost my train of thought.
That's right there.
I think what really got me was that the research has shown that the socioeconomic integration works both ways. It works for everybody involved. And it also teaches our children how to work together and get along with other people that are just not like them. The school where I work is predominantly African American, and when they're